Hey guys, it's Katie. Thanks for stopping by my channel. Today is going to be a bread baking video. I got a question about freezing dough, and I actually had some frozen dough in my freezer, so I pulled it out and we're going to work with it today. If you're thinking about freezing dough, there's a couple different ways, or a few different ways that you can do it. Generally when you make bread, you mix your ingredients together and then you knead that dough. You'll put that dough to rise just like in a lump or a ball, and it will have an initial rise. Sometimes it's called bulk fermentation, and that's just like a ball of dough rising up. Then usually after that doubles in size, you will shape it into the loaf that you want it to be. So you knock all that gas that's built up in the bulk fermentation, you knock that down a little bit, and you shape your loaf or your rolls or whatever you're gonna make, and then you put it like in the cake or the bread pan or on however you're gonna bake it, and you let that loaf rise. And then after it's doubled in size, you bake it. So you have two places where it is rising, where it's fermenting. And so you can kind of stop it at different points and freeze the dough. So what I used to do a long time ago when I was making like most of the bread we were eating, I would make a big batch of dough and I would let it rise, and then I would separate it into loaves. I would shape and form the loaves, and then I would wrap them up in freezer paper and I would put them in the freezer. And then when I want to use them, I would take they were shaped just like loaves. It was raw dough shaped like a loaf. I would unwrap the freezer paper and I would set it inside a bread pan. Now it was still small, so it fit down in the bread pan, solid, hard as a rock, and it would thaw and rise. And once it rises up, then you kind of start from where you would have if you were doing it freshly. So then you just put it in the oven and it bakes. The dough that I have, it's in my microwave right now. I actually just mixed it up, let it knead, and before I did the bulk fermentation, I froze it. And it's actually the same recipe that I used to do this a lot with. Some things you need to keep in mind when you're freezing dough is when it comes out of the, well, first of all, the freezing is not going to hurt your yeast. In fact, the freezer is where I keep my yeast. So it's not going to hurt the yeast. It's just going to slow it down a lot. So when I put this bread dough in this morning, I put it in at like 9:30, and it took like 4 or 5 hours just to thaw. So now it's 2 o'clock and it's now soft. It's not like hard as a rock, but it hasn't risen up at all. So it takes a significantly longer time because it takes several hours just to thaw the bread dough, and then it takes the same, if not more, amount of time to rise. Because you're starting from a colder dough, it's going to take longer. So I'm going to actually do my little proof box trick where I'm going to boil the water that's in a cup in the microwave and let it get hot, and then we'll put it in, and it'll be as if I just pulled this out of my mixer and I'm letting it do its first bulk ferment. Yes, that's what my microwave sounds like. It just started one day and we thought it was going to break, and we were actually shopping around for a new one for when this one pooped out, we would replace it, and it never pooped out. It just makes this horrible sound. Oh. Alright, so the water is boiling and I'm just going to get it in there as quick as I can. And so generally that would take like 45 minutes, an hour, just depends on the recipe. This might take like 2 or 3 hours, so don't go by a time period, but I mean, it took hours and hours to thaw. It's going to take extra hours to do the bulk ferment, and it's going to take maybe an equivalent amount of time, but maybe more, for the final rise. So if you're thinking of freezing bread dough to save time, it kind of, I mean, I guess you're saving effort, not time, because it's actually taking more time to do it this way. But if you want to like mix up a bunch of bread dough and just have it, I would question whether you're not saving time. So we've established that. And I would question whether you're saving effort, because unless you have a large capacity mixer and you're putting it all on a stand mixer and letting it do the work, mixing up a triple batch of a recipe, or a recipe that makes 3 loaves of bread or 2 loaves of bread, well, 1 loaf of bread and 2 loaves of bread are pretty equivalent in my opinion. They're not any harder, but if you want to make up a bunch, you're putting more work into making the triple batch of bread. So like I said, I've done it. I used to do it all the time. I'll give you some examples of when it is good, but what I would do and what I do now most regularly is if I'm going to do a double or triple batch of bread, do the bread, freshly rise it, for the bulk ferment, freshly shape it, freshly do everything fresh, bake the bread, and then wrap up the bread and freeze it. Because then you're not, then you can take it out, you can thaw in the refrigerator, or if it's already sliced, you can kind of just pry off a frozen slice, put it in the toaster, and that's the only way you're going to save time, really. So if you're doing it to save time, I would bake the bread and then freeze it. If you're doing it to save effort, you got to kind of see if you're actually saving yourself effort. So here are the times when I would do it. Things like rolls is a very good reason to do it. So what I would do is let the dough do its bulk ferment and then shape them into the rolls. And before they rise, put them into the freezer. And then you'll have little like balls of dough, and you take out just a few, however many you want to make. So if you have a smaller family or you just want 1 or 2 rolls to fill out a meal or something, you can take just a few and then put them on a cookie sheet. You can do the same thing, warm up your microwave. Most cookie sheets, if you have a big enough, my microwave, I can fit most cookie sheets in here. If you can't fit them in your microwave, you can do a similar thing in your oven. I would do a larger, like a shallower pan of water. So like if you had a wide shallow pan, or boil water in a kettle and put it in like a wide shallow cake pan and put it in the oven. Now your oven is bigger, so you're going to need more steam and more heat to give you the same. That's why I like the microwave, because it's very confined. So just a cup of water is all you need. But you could do the same thing in your oven if your cookie sheet doesn't fit in your microwave, or if you don't have a microwave. But I would do it for like rolls and things like that. But really I found that it's easier to just make the bread and then freeze the bread. So that's what I have to say about freezing dough. This, like I said, might take all day. I put it in this morning at 9. I thought about doing it last night, but I kind of wanted to keep track of the time, and I didn't want to come down in the morning and find it like all overproofed or anything. So yeah, it's already been working for a long time, and I could have mixed up 3 or 4 batches of bread and had them in the oven in the time it's taken this to thaw and rise. So I'll kind of keep track of how long it takes to make this loaf of bread, and I guess I'll put a couple clips of that at the end. Alright, I guess that's risen double in size. I go ahead and shape it and re-warm up the microwave and then put it back in. Hopefully I'll be able to bake this before bedtime tonight. It's already like 7:45. Not my best shaped job, but it'll do. I forgot about my bread. I fell asleep and I just woke up. We're baking some bread at midnight. I could just put it in the fridge and bake it in the morning. I'll just bake it now. Alright, so this is how the bread turned out. It did stick to the pan, so I had to kind of cut it out. It's not the prettiest loaf, and it's a little bit overproofed. The crumb is a little larger and more irregular, but it's soft, tender, and the flavor is great. So, like I said, it's a lot more work than it's really worth. But if you have any tips for freezing bread dough, if it works well for you, leave comments down below. Maybe I'm doing something wrong or missing something. Maybe you could help us out too. If not, then hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!